Okay, hello and welcome to Dano Says So. This is a surprise episode for me in that when I got the idea, I didn't really think it was something that could happen. My guest today is I believe, 4-time women's champion.
It's true.
In the WWE, and in 2014, correct? She was elected to the WWE Hall of Fame. Perhaps less common knowledge to a lot of people is that she is, as they say, a hardcore kid. So, Amy Dumas, thank you immensely for doing this. And before we get started, it might be nice, why don't you let people know who put us in touch?
I get a text from Kevin Seconds, and he says, a friend of mine, then goes into your biography, and I'm like, Kev, I know who Dan is. Yeah, of course, I'll do a show. But Kev is funny because while people might not know that I'm a punk rock kid, I've had 7 Seconds patches and stuff on my gear when I was wrestling. So it's one band that people know. So he's been the go-to for putting me in touch with a lot of different people, actually.
Yeah, well, when I put the idea to him, I thought he would shoot it down because he didn't want to put himself in that position. And his take was, no, dude, she's legit hardcore. She'll probably do it. I was like, then you have an assignment, sir.
Also, he's great at putting people together because everybody loves Kevin. So they're like, whatever you want, you know.
He was my first guest in doing this. And he jumped in with both feet, was fully enthusiastic, and gave me a great, great interview. So, it was... Anybody else might have made me reluctant to keep going with it. With him, I was like, oh, this shit's easy. So.
Yeah, he's a great storyteller.
Okay, so with both of us shining a light on it, tell me how a young Amy Dumas finds punk rock.
7th grade, I think. I was at the bus stop, and Carrie Burke, who's just like a chick from my school, but she was a year older. And when you're young, even like 1 year is big, and she just had this really cool look about her, and I asked her what kind of music she listened to, and she just told me, I'll make you a mixtape. And so she made me my first mixtape, and it had Dag Nasty and 7 Seconds and Black Flag and Circle Jerks and everything. She's also kind of a new wave. I had The Cure.
A pretty strong pedigree out the gate, but you go on.
Yeah. So I was like, whoa, because before that I had only known about the radio. And so to connect with music in a way that it was definitely like you just feel alive, and you're like, whoa, like I didn't know I was looking for this, but I found it, and it changed my path forever. I always joke that 7 Seconds were like my parents. Like I would read their lyrics for advice. It was like, what would 7 Seconds do if they were in this situation, and just use their words as a Bible to me as a child.
I think there's no small amount of people who would agree with that. Not to make this all about Kevin, and maybe to babble a little bit. I used to say that for me, the holy trinity of punk rock role models was, Ian was the brain, and Henry was the brawn, and Kevin Seconds was absolutely the heart.
Okay, I wasn't going to interrupt you, but I was like, it's got to be Ian, Kevin, and Henry. Like,
right.
In this, you could have in different offshoots, but right. Yeah, I would agree with you hands down.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we've got a 7th grader with the ultimate starting mixtape. Keep going.
Yeah, and then I think it was within about 6 months that I went to my first show, and if I wasn't hooked before then, it was like, forget it. Like, I'm part of this club that if you weren't in that room, you didn't know it happened, and I remember just feeling really special. And then on top of that, it was like those people that I just saw on stage are the same people that just sold me the t-shirt after the show. And so I connected to the DIY aspect of it immediately. I connected to the, if you want to do something, you can. Like, look at these. They're just these dudes, like in a van that looks like it wouldn't get outside the city, but they've made it across the country.
Right.
And I used that, was like, I can do whatever I want. These people can, you know,
Right.
and it was very inspirational to me, from not like from ethos, but also just like apply that model to whatever it is that you want to do.
There was a story that I may have mentioned in one of the other podcasts, but it had to do with journalism. And I don't mind repeating it here, just by way of it's what I find relatable in what you just told me. So about 5 years ago, I'm interviewing this journalist who, in his heyday, had been involved in funding dissident journalism in Cuba, and he would go down into Cuba with tens of thousands of dollars strapped to his body, and finance dissident writers, right? Well, me and this hardcore kid, Ryan, we're interviewing him and setting up this public speaking event for him and everything else. And he tells us, "You guys are amazing, amazing organizers. I'm in awe of this," which made no sense to us. But when I left the room, I said to Ryan, I was like, when you're a punk rock kid and you want to take over the world, you just take over the world, because you don't know that you can't, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I felt that it was like kid power. I was like, these guys are doing it. I can do it.
Right.
And you don't think like, what if I fail? It's just like, I don't know, let's just go plaster this on every telephone pole I see from here to the venue, and see if people come, because that's how I just found out about the show I wanted to go to, or that's how I found out about the protest or whatever. It was just like seeing stuff on the ground, asking around, word of mouth, without having the internet or whatever tools we use now.
So I already know this by virtue of watching Luchagor's videos over the last week and so forth. But at this early state that we're talking about, did you get into actually playing music?
Let's see, I moved to DC in 92 or 93, somewhere around there.
Okay.
And that's when I played in my first band,
Okay.
was there. And that was more due to just being broke and music was free.
Right.
So,
Okay.
if you could borrow some equipment. So yeah, I lived in like a basement studio with the band Damnation. Do you remember them from
Damnation
DC?
AD or Damnation?
Yeah, Damnation AD. There was like After Worlds Collide.
I want to say that one of my later bands, Speak, played with them. I know we played for 6 weeks, I think, with Battery.
Yeah, right. So all
kind
overlap.
Of that whole, yeah.
Yeah, so they, Ken Olden had a studio in the basement, and I lived in the basement. So they're like, we were broke, but there was music equipment everywhere. So I was like, well, it's free to sit here and play, like figure out how to play around on this. So I played in some bands when I was in DC.
I got a level with you. I knew you had a punk rock background. Now that we're talking, I had no idea the world was this damn small. That's funny.
Yeah, it's incestuous. It's weird because it's like that thing, if you like meet someone from Canada and you're like, oh, you're from Canada, do you know this person? But if it is like that with punk rock, where you're like, oh, do you know this person? It's like, I could probably get a few down the list and we're going to find an overlap person. That's just how it is. I mean, from the same era,
Well, I'm older than you are, and I came in kind of early mid 80s. And even that, like, pre-cellular networking, even that, the story remains true even at that level. I'm talking to people pushing 60, and it only takes about 5 minutes to be sharing names,
Yeah, definitely.
It's an exciting thing. I gotta say, I don't know if that's as true now. I wonder if digital has ruined that in punk rock and in hardcore.
I wonder if it's ruined it, or it's made it where they don't know each other, but it's like, oh, I follow that person on Instagram, or I know of that person. Whereas, I feel like our like pre-internet, it'd be like, oh, I crashed on that person's floor, or that person gave me a phone number to go book a house show in another town that they knew of.
Okay. So wrestling for person of either gender, pursuing professional wrestling is a brave goal, and wouldn't strike me as an easy target to hit. Can you kind of give us a quick rundown on your path? I know the story of seeing Mysterio and heading to Mexico, and I'd really like detail on that. I mean, when does the thought first hit your head, wrestling?
The thought first hit my head. I was living in Richmond at the time.
Okay.
And my longtime childhood sweetheart was Bo from Avail, and his
with the dancing Bo with the crazy ass beard.
Dancing Bo with the crazy ass beard.
All right.
and his thing was wrestling. It was his dude thing, is like, don't bother me when I'm in this room watching wrestling thing. And
Okay.
I was like, that's cool. But I would keep popping my head in to ask him a question or something, and got hooked. And it was almost like a child, you know, where I was like, oh, you know what? And I was taking judo, and I'd played in bands, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, look, it's like being a rock star and an athlete in one gig. Like
Mm-hmm.
I just was kind of watching it from an onlooker's perspective. And they had a 6-week tour booked to Europe in like a couple months. And so
Okay.
I was like, I think if I save up money, I can go down to Mexico and try to figure out how to be a wrestler. And so it really was, I just threw a dart and went down there and just walked the streets and asked people where I could find the lucha libre and how I could get in. And, you know, it took a minute, but by the end of my 6-week trip, I had
Uh-huh.
found the inns. And so I went home and saved up money again and went back down there. And, you know, finally somebody was like, you know, there's schools and ways that you can do this, like probably like an hour or so from your house. And I was like, I sure don't. That's why I just
Well, and would it have been the same? Because my perception is that the style is, at least to my taste, vastly superior.
the
Yeah.
style is like, you know, I liked, it was like a superhero aspect, right? They're
Exactly.
masked and they're doing these acrobatic moves, and that aspect really spoke to me. And I mean, honestly, just the being a kid down there figuring it out, you know, I always tell people I wouldn't change my story. Like I wouldn't trade it for anything. I learned so much. I had the really like full sensory, you know, learning of trying to figure out how to do this. Now you like pull up Yelp and put wrestling school in there, and it's going to give
Right.
you some options. So I do think that's probably a safer, more effective way to go about it, but I didn't know any better. So I will take my story, and it shaped, you know, it's just like a huge facet of shaping who I am too.
And so did it go train in Mexico, shows in Mexico, local shows in the States, ECW as fast as it looks like it did on paper? Because it looks like you hauled ass.
Yeah, it did. I was definitely very determined, and my concept was like, go anywhere. There might be someone more experienced than I am
Mm-hmm.
to like give me a nugget to build on. So I was
Mm-hmm.
going to indie shows 3-4 days a week. I was training with anyone that said they'd give me an hour in the ring to get some ring time in. Um, you know, with ECW, I just caught wind that they did training before their show, like after they
Mm-hmm.
set the ring up. So I just sat outside the high school that they were doing the show at and waited for someone to show up and asked if I could just watch. And then they're like, you
Right.
can watch. And then as I sat there, they're like, okay, you can go to the ring. And then as I got in the ring and messed around, they're like, okay, you can have a tryout match. And then that night, I think I was on the show that night.
I would
So,
imagine so. I mean, what I remember is that we were in the bands I was in, we were, you know, wrestling geeks at the time. And I had grown up in a family that was obsessed with it because my namesake was a wrestler. And my father, you know, this guy wrestled in the 30s and 40s. So my father is, you know, front and center at Madison Square Garden, at Fenway, at Boston Garden, you know, watching his old man do it. So all I ever heard about when I was a kid. Then I ended up playing music with a guy who put on local wrestling shows here. Then it was, you know, you get home from tour and you're drinking on Monday night because you don't have a job because you're going out on tour again. And it's the Attitude Era. And it was a borderline obsession. It was certainly a massive distraction. I remember very specifically when you hit in 2000, and I remember, and please don't take this the wrong way, it is a guilt of the presentation. But the initial assumption is that this person is on screen right now for window dressing and everything else. And then in the first moments that I saw you, at the end of that, you went top rope,
mm-hmm.
right? And where I'm getting with this overly long question is, when you arrived, did people go, holy God, regarding your skill set? Because it seemed to step up from what I was seeing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, which would not be a bad thing, but it seemed to step up from what I was really seeing in the women's division at the time, and sort of what the expectation was in women's wrestling, to me anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't really a women's division at
Okay.
that time. You know, we had Sable, we had
Mm-hmm.
China, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, some people to kind of just have a match here or there. But So when they told me they were going to pair me with S.A. Rios,
Mhm.
I mean, we debuted on like the B show last minute, but
Mhm.
when they told me you're up and you're going to be paired with this person, I mean,
Mhm.
I'm like, you couldn't have put me in a better spot, because I was a fan of his, of Aguilar, Mr. Aguilar, or S.A.
Mhm.
Rios in WWE. I was a fan of his, and then the fact, and I thought, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to train really hard, but even if I don't get to do this stuff,
Mhm.
maybe I can, all right, maybe eventually they'll let me do something. I'm just going to play by their rules and then see if I can push into it. And when they said, no, we want you to emulate his moves, we know that you can do some stuff, I was thrilled. And they really, with as wild as Attitude Era was, and as other crazy stuff as it was in a day at the office, to be able to
Mhm.
showcase athleticism like that and dig into that lucha libre roots, it was really a dream come true.
It was pretty next level to the outside eye. You said something right in there that made me think about something I read over the last couple of days. Is it true that you heard the name moniker, or got the name moniker after the fact, after that match? You found out about it by viewing it, or?
Yeah. So everything, it's a live show on
Right.
Mondays, and then we would film. At that time, it was a show called Heat that would air on Sundays, and we filmed that before the live Raw.
Okay.
And they were going to do something else, and Christian was going to go out and win the light heavyweight title from
Mhm.
Gilbert, and who had been doing like a Goldberg spoof
I remember.
for a long time. And then they decided they were doing something else with the Brood that night, so Christian wasn't going to be available. And literally like an hour before Heat was going on, they're like, you two kids are up, get out there, just mimic a move or two of his, and he's going to win. And we're like, okay, what are our names? Are we like boyfriend, girlfriend? Is this like what's happening? And they're like, we don't know, we'll
What's my
figure it out
motivation? Yeah.
before. Yeah, what's my motivation? We'll figure it out before we're live, or before it airs on Sunday. And
Mhm.
we're like, all right, like, great, whatever you guys want. We're just stoked to be able to do this.
Mhm.
And yeah, I remember, I think someone like 6 hours before Heat was aired, or the day before, they're like, oh, your name's Lita. And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, I heard. And I was like, I don't know. And then, yeah, when I was like, I guess I'll watch Heat and find out. And I watched it live, and they're like, oh, who is this? It's S.A. Rios and Lita. And I was like, it took me a long time for someone to call that name and for me to respond, because I have no attachment to it. Like, it
I was gonna
didn't
say,
mean
is it weird as
anything.
hell? Because it's with you for life now, or at least for the foreseeable future.
For life. I've finally accepted it. When I
Yeah.
first retired, I really tried to battle that, where I was like, I'm Amy, I am Amy. Like, that was a
Mhm.
character, that was a moment in time. And I'm like, it's fine. And honestly, now I hear it sounds the exact same to me. If somebody calls me Lita or Amy, I'm just like, huh, what? Like they're talking to me. Like, what do you need? Like, what's up?
Okay. That kind of leads me into some of the psychological stuff I wanted to ask you about, which might be a little hurdy-gurdy, but I want one more question first, though. You broke your neck.
Yeah.
Was that the first time you had to think about life after wrestling? And beyond that, fuck wrestling. How scary was that? Or was it you were going through it and you could just realize it is what it is?
No, it was horrifying. And it was a huge pivotal, like, I say, it was that moment that I lost my kid power. We
Okay.
touched on it earlier. It was like, you don't think about what you're going to do if you fail. You're just like, I don't know, let's go out and do this thing. And whether you're doing that in a band, or whether you're doing, like, whatever it is, you just like approaching it with like, I want to do this thing. Let's figure out how to do it. And
Mhm.
I lived my whole life that way until that. I was like, oh, I'm not invincible. Like, you can get hurt. Like, things can
Mhm.
come crashing down. And it was and that was really the first time that I had a moment to think about, even reflect on the fact that I had gone after what I wanted to do, and that I had even got to the WWE, because I didn't have a moment to think, because as soon as I set my sights, I was like, okay, what's next? What's next? What's next? And it was a bit of a whirlwind until I found myself sitting at home and then going, all right, you're not paralyzed. The surgery was successful. You're going to
Mhm.
be okay. But how about you reflect on the past 2 years, from the second you saw Rey Mysterio on
Mhm.
television to
Right.
now breaking your neck, a couple years later. So It was a lot. And the fact, a really hard thing with that is the person was negligent and not trained, and I gave them like every opportunity, and they were lying with their ability. This was a stunt person. I
Yeah, I
dropped on
know it
my
was on a
head.
TV set. I know it was on a TV set,
Yeah.
not in a WWE ring.
So I was very angry. I was so mad at that person. And as painful as it was to break my neck, the pain of being like wishing ill on somebody and being so mad at somebody was a heavy burden to bear. And I felt it more important to figure out how to forgive this person than how to get well, because it was poison.
Well, my friend Billy, we were talking about resentment, and he used the phrase that it does more damage to the vessel carrying it than anything else. And I had to admit, that's pretty brilliant.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like the saying, like it's resentment's like taking poison and then waiting for the other person to die, right? Like
exactly.
me, she's like on the next movie, she's like doing her thing, living her life, and I'm the one that's just like fuming, dreaming about this person and how mad I am. It's like, okay, you've got to figure out how to
Yeah,
deal
well,
with this,
Amy,
because
nobody's calling her by a made-up name 20 years later. So,
who the hell did she ever beat?
yeah. You, correct me if I'm wrong, you went back to full-blown regular active roster after that, though.
Yeah,
Was
they
that
said a
terrifying, or did
year.
you get your head around it pretty easy?
No, they said a year recovery. And when it was a year, I was just starting to feel okay. And I said,
Okay.
I'm not ready. I'm not ready. A year is
Yeah.
not enough for me. And had I gone back at a year trying to push myself, going like, no, I'm going to beat that recovery time, like as an athlete and just wanting to do, it's like you want to be in control, right? No, I can, but I was realistic and I was like, don't go back yet. And so I just taking those extra 3 months, by the time I did go back, I was ready to just blow the doors off the place. I felt really great. I'm so glad that
Nice.
I had the perspective to wait those extra 3 months instead of be young and dumb and go, nope, I'm doing this anyways, even though I knew I didn't feel ready.
When do you still have some involvement with the company?
I'm an indentured servant. Well,
It seems like everybody's never fully all the way out. And I don't mean that as a positive or a negative, but faces show back up, and I don't know how you pass your day right now other than what I can Google, and I don't consider that particularly reliable.
right.
And during COVID, I don't imagine anybody does fucking anything. But what I would ask is just go ahead.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, they're actively wrestling every week, and so the bottom line is they'll call from time to time and say, "Do you want to come be a guest here? Do you want to come pop up here?" And it's case by case. If I'm busy or if I'm just not in the wrestling zone headspace, I'll decline, and I'm entitled to decline. If it sounds like a good time, and I'm like, sure, I'll pop in, and feels like a high school reunion or something like that, then I'll go do that. I will not do it during a pandemic and
Right.
travel and put myself in close proximity with
You're not going to endanger yourself in front of the digital fans.
Not going to do it. Yeah. I'll stay a digital fan for right now.
There you go. What facilitated, enabled, or caused, let's call it your real retirement, not the neck breaking interim, but what drove you to hang it up?
So working for WWE is a beyond for full-time gig. I mean, if you're not working, you're on call, and you might think that you have the day off, and then you'll get a call. Oh, can you do 6 a.m. phoner tomorrow? You need to do this media tour. So I had missed, every friend's weddings, birthday. My friends forgot I was alive because they just, after you call someone half a dozen times to hang out and the answer is no, or I'm out of town, you get taken off the list.
Right.
So, and, having musical interests and just having other interests in general, I was like, I accomplished more than I ever thought I could in this industry. I'd rather fall flat on my face on the next chapter, but I've got to get outside this bubble and be okay with what I'm proud of what I did here, but also it's like, call it before being dragged out of the ring. I just felt that it was time to take a breath and see what else I could do.
That to me also sounds in rhythm with everything you've told me about. You just decided it's time to do something, and you go friggin' do it. Whether, in music, in wrestling, in heading to Mexico, in all of these things. So that doesn't surprise me that it was more a decision than an event, So some questions that I wanted to ask you, because while we've definitely demonstrated that we have a shared background, we have people in common, it's an easily relatable conversation. I'm an underground musician. I think I've maxed out. Most people I ever played to was 10,000 people in Berlin, and they weren't there to see me. They were there to see 20 bands at a street festival, right? By and large, you play to 200 or 300 people. And at times in my life when that has disappeared, even like right now, it fucks up my head. Right? Well, tens of thousands or 20,000s, many nights a week for many years. What was a vacuum like when you stopped?
I remember taking just sleeping for like days on end, and about 4 or 5 days after I retired, it's like, right, you're saying like it's like chaos, fanfare, all this stuff. Just took like a long nap. I remember taking my dog for a walk in the cemetery, and I was like, oh my God, how did I do that? Like, that was crazy. Like, how did you not sleep for so long? Just be going on to the next, on to the next. The fan thing, that was a conscious effort, because I felt like I could see people who in the locker room who like were really driven by that. Mm-hmm. And I always made it a really conscious effort to like remind myself, like, don't believe your own hype, and like you're just to do this because it's a fun and a unique path, but just because people are chanting your name, it doesn't make you more valuable or more important. That part, I felt like I didn't miss that. That was just kind of part of the gig.
Well, the thing that seemed, sorry to interrupt you, but the thing that would seem weird or difficult to me, in music, it's largely autobiographical. In wrestling, while it's the athleticism is over the top, there's a big portrayal factor. There's a fictional storyline going on, and there's a portrayed individual, right?
Yeah.
So perception versus reality, and when you are by no means invisible or unknown, that just seems to me like it would be a real mindfuck and really difficult to navigate.
Yeah, you're right. That was really difficult to navigate, because I would be very closed off. When I would meet people for the first time, and it took me a long time. I got right into like this like artist musician scene in Atlanta when I was living in Atlanta when I retired. And it took me a minute to just have my walls down and be like, they don't care that you're Lita, like whether they know or not. Like, I was like, they're mining me for information. They want to know something. Like, I just felt very protective and closed off, or they think they know me in this way. They think they know because of something they read on the internet or saw in the ring that has nothing to do with me. And they already have a preconceived notion of who I am. Like, all this is going on my head like a crazy person for a long time. When I first retired. And so that was for sure a mindfuck, like just being like, who wants me for what? And like, but also like, I want friends that call me Amy, that like me for who I am, but how do I find out? And I mean, I'd had stuff where, and I think it worked both ways. Like, people that did watch me in wrestling, but were artists and musicians, were like, I don't want to let her know I was a fan, because I don't want, to, like, they would assume my neuroses.
Well, even at this removed years down the line vantage point, it was a concern going into the interview, of framing this correctly, to be respectful and to acknowledge the person as being about much more than I understand. Well, I mean, and that's somebody who's being careful and curating the interaction. People are just running into you. I can imagine they hurl some real garbage.
Yeah,
and
I mean, I remember
unintentionally, but
totally unintentionally, totally not realizing what that might do to my psyche, or like they're not absorbing my, journey. But I remember some woman, that I was like getting to know, and I was like, oh, she seems really cool. And then like after 5 times hanging out with her, she got drunk and she was just like, oh my God, Lita. And then I was like, oh no. And I felt like I was like, oh, I've been had. Like they've known all along, and they acted like they didn't. And I was like so turned off. But then I was like, it's okay. Like, she's still who she is. She just didn't want to let me know she was a fan because we were developing like two people from ground zero. But I felt like, but you know about me, and all I know about you is what you've told me. And then, like, you didn't disclose that information. So it is like a weird thing about when you're a fan. And even like you're saying, from a band standpoint, if somebody was like, didn't know, like, didn't act like they knew of who you were, and they're just like,
Right.
so what did you do? And you're like, you know what I did. Like, don't.
Right.
So.
And in the microscopic level that I've been visible in, and I make it a practice to never introduce the fact that I do music to strangers on any level. For one thing, punk rock and hardcore don't translate to people that don't come from it. But then within it, you know, by era and by geography, it all comes with its like inherent prejudices. I just leave it out. They can know me for a while before they say, "Hey, were you that asshole?" You know.
Oh, absolutely. I do the same thing. I have like a gamut of fake jobs and things that I make up, like that, or they might be a facet of something that I do, but it's like, I for sure don't lead by meeting a stranger with that I was a former WWE professional wrestler. Like, I wait to be like, let's let you have your own opinion of who you, like, a little bit who you think I am, before I just like dump that pile of shit on top of you, you know?
These go fast, keeping them short, but I've got to tell you, this has been a real joy, which I find myself saying often. I'm really glad that I ended up doing these. It's like the adventure of a middle-aged man and his cheap laptop, you know. but this in particular has been a fun one. I want to ask you something that is neither Amy specific nor punk rock specific, but why the Bay Area? Because I'm a former Bay Area resident who still has an incurable crush on the town. Now, for me, it's the East Bay, but really, Bay Area is unlike anywhere else in the country. How did you arrive at that conclusion?
Yeah, so I found myself probably 7 years ago or so. I was recently single. I was living in Atlanta, and all of my friends were just like married up and moving into the suburbs. And doesn't mean I didn't love them any less, but especially in the South, like, I'm at the grocery store and they're like, when are you getting married? When are you having children? And I'm like, that's not a thing for everyone. Like,
Right.
and so I just kind of felt like, I know what's here. I'll always have an attachment to Atlanta, but I want to go somewhere where people are living different lives and it's not considered grocery store chatter to ask somebody when you're getting married. Or, I mean, not like, it's not like that was the bane of my, but it's just like that you have to fit into this box, or that you're supposed to live your life in a certain way, and that's what's considered successful.
The city is off script, or at least on a different script. I get what you're saying.
Totally. So I just knew that, you know, I had about the same amount of friends in LA and in San Francisco. And so it was 50-50 of where I would have ended up. And, you know, just the vibe and the, like, the liberal intelligence and that culture just grabbed, like, I attached to more than, say, LA. So I just landed here. And I said, you know what, I'll give it a year. 6 years ago. So I'll give it a year. If nothing less, like, I'll go to great museums. I'll go on beautiful hikes. Maybe I'll meet some people and move on. But I'm still here.
No, I would never have left. I left because of a dying relative. I was the lone surviving contact for an elderly woman, and had to come back to SoCal. But you know, congratulations on living where I wish I did. Well, listen, this exceeds expectations and was really fun for me. If I can find a substantive reason to do it, I would love to talk to you again sometime.
Sounds great. Nice to meet you virtually, and maybe in real life someday when we can be around other humans.
I was going to say, between COVID and budget, the Bay Area seems like a distant dream, but played in Oakland last year, played in downtown Oakland at the Golden Bowl last year. So it's probably just a matter of vaccines before I get to see a lot of special people again. And yeah, I will ring the bell when I'm coming north, because that would be great.
All right. Sounds good, Dan. Thanks for your time.
All right, cool. I'm going to kill record. Thank you, Amy.